Hello, Susan. A huge welcome back to the show.
Hi, Lian. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, really my pleasure. And I started this morning not knowing what we were going to talk about today, and it turns out to be something I just couldn't have possibly imagined. And it feels like such an important and necessary conversation in these times. So I feel very grateful and privileged that we're able to have this conversation on this topic today. So thank you.
Thank you, Lian. Yeah, I'm so grateful for the work you're doing, and these conversations are beautiful. Thank you.
So we spoke early this year, I can't quite remember when it was, and went very deep into the work you're doing with microdosing in general. And as we were just discussing, your work has taken a somewhat unexpected turn, is my sense, into working with people specifically that have cancer. And it's that we're going to look at today. And I don't know where you'd think is best to start, whether it's to talk about kind of how you've been it feels very much like called into this particular focus, or if you'd like to start somewhere else. You really tune in and let me know where you think is going to be the best place.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. Let's just begin with work in general, as you and I both know, as we enter into the path of a deeper layers of work, it just gets more intense and intense. As we grow in capacity, I feel like the more deeper work is revealed on our path. I feel like this is happening. It's been a very progressive journey in learning and also facilitating and for the integration of microdosing. And then, yeah, as the time is going past, I believe it's correlated with the level of learning and capacity that now maybe I need to be stepping into holding more intense spaces for more intense work. So it's a very progressive journey that I'm observing, and I'm happy with that. I'm okay with that. I mean, it's not easy. It is kind of, I mean, it feels daunting, but then at the same time, there is a deep layer of trust. Like there is a deep depth of, yes, I'm going with this flow and I'm trusting. So that's what's happening. I guess that's the reason that this more intense work is showing up, mainly with cancer lately, cancer patients, and also deeper work is revealing from the mental health perspective, like critical, really serious OCD, or those really really people that are really mentally struggling, and mental health challenges are really on the high rise, as you know. And I feel like yeah, my work is definitely getting more intense lately.
Yeah. So focusing on what you've been experiencing with regards to the medicines that you've been working with and cancer, why, this is a kind of slightly maybe sort of philosophical question, but I'm interested to know, like, why do you see there is almost like a match between the two? What's going on there? Like, why is and I know that primarily we're talking about psilocybin here. Why do you see that psilocybin is this I feel like, again, the word match wants to come up, so I'm just going to use this match for cancer.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. Thank you for that. I think it's really important question as well. So I listened to a lecture not long ago, the second time actually I first come across this lecture. It's a doctor from Germany, and he was diagnosed, a very successful doctor, and he was diagnosed with cancer very soon after he lost his son tragically. And he started to really dig into, like, what is this? Is it to do with that, or have I been triggered in some way in my biological system? Have triggered in some way? And after doing many years of deep diving into this work, he discovered that there are parts of our brain, and the brain, we talk about the old parts of the brain, the old part, the stem, and then the hypothalamus, all these little parts of the brain that apparently correlated with our organs, different parts of our body, different parts of our organs. And when our reality is challenged, or when we are under stress, extreme stress, he called it I think he called it conflict shock, meaning something that happens instantly that we're not prepared for, that really shakes up the system. Obviously, this is a perceived experience coming in through the brain, parts of the brain that is correlated with our organs, and that triggers something in that cell mass, and then the cancer pops. Because a lot of people say that cancer lives in everybody, but there are events and in ways which that can come up in our lives and existence, in our awareness. So he correlated all this work. So I find a great value in this, because the reason I want to tie this in with why I'm talking about this doctor's work is that, so he says, for example, if a part of our brain, part of our mind, part of our waking consciousness perceives as a very stressful event as a loss, for example, then it can correlate to like lung cancer and things like that, because lung cancer is, then again, if you look at it metaphorically, you can't breathe, it's loss of your life, lost, and then you'll lose, like loss of your life. So all those kind of work that he did, and in traditional therapy or in traditional treatments, everything that I'm talking about now, it's a very alternative, unconventional way of thinking of cancer. And obviously a therapy or even going into the traditional treatment of chemotherapy and other kind of ways to treat the cancer, unfortunately, like the success rate is very low still. And it's very symptom based and directly, focusing on the symptom. So, but what this doctor is saying, let's understand the symptoms, let's understand the illness, the disease of the cancer and which part of the body, and let's understand and reflect and have an inventory of what is going on that could correlate to this outcome. Psychologically, on an emotionally and psychological and emotional level, so that we have the upper hand in awareness and understanding and the possibilities. Obviously, we don't know this, we're just kind of brainstorming together here. There is no proof of any of this, but however, now the increase in science and research, and that everything is coming together in this new development of the psychedelic medicines. There is now it's time to have this conversation. It's time to have and look at these medicines. I call them medicines for our listeners. These are psychedelic substances, some of them which come from the nature, like mushrooms, ayahuasca wine, DMT, and cactus, the peyote, and mescaline. So, and then we have the novel substances that are created in labs, so many of those. So all in all, we can call them psychedelic medicines, which I prefer, or substances, whichever they prefer. But the idea is that why are we now leaning towards the psychedelic medicines as a treatment, as an alternative treatment, is because there is something really interesting happening between the relationship between the psychedelic medicines and the human biology. Somehow these medicines have this authoritative force of bringing the truth faster than anything else we've experienced as humans.
Wow.
And, yeah, and some of our mentors, some of our researchers, some of these great legendary people in the field of psychedelic research, they have enough data to show us that we have evolved with them. These are not new. They are not something that just popped up in last 5 years, because in the last 5 years, we are experiencing a real force of the psychedelic renaissance, they call it. it's the progressive process of the psychedelic revolution in the 50s, right? But they're saying this goes beyond any of this. What we know in the West, it goes to maybe 5,000 years, even if not more. If not, it's beginning of our ever human existence that we have evolved together with these medicines, because the chemical compounds that they have or consist are very similar, if not the same, we have in our bodies, in our biology. That's why they are effective. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh my goodness, yes, and more. My body reacts very in a very obvious way when I'm hearing things like this. I've been getting like chills and goosebumps constantly as you've been talking, where it's kind of like, for me, this recognition of truth as you were speaking. Yeah, that really makes so much sense. Going back to what you were talking about, what this doctor was discovering, it sounded like the focus was very much on kind of more acute forms of stress, shock. Does he say, or have you seen similar? And I get that, you know, to an extent, this is a hypothesis rather than necessarily like we have absolute evidence of this. But would you say we could see the same is true of more chronic forms of stress, or, you know, whatever word you want to give to it, but something that is creating a similar effect, but in a chronic way?
Yeah, I would say yes. So again, I'm going to lean towards some of our mentors in the field, such as Dr. Stanislas Grof. I mean, he's the clinical psychiatrist, and he's one of the very rare psychologists in the field of psychedelic assisted therapy who has the data, the level of data that he has. I'm not sure if anyone else has. So that's the level of authority and the wisdom that he carries. And in his findings, we're working with patients. This was before the psychedelic substances became criminalized and legalized. So he was seeing in correlation that a lot of the chronic symptoms, a lot of the chronic untreatable symptoms that we see even this day, like it's probably increased now since we're living in the pandemic era, post-pandemic era. He was saying that these are already being in the system for many, many years dormant. And then something along the path of life, something really stressful happens and activates and brings these to the surface, which then turns into acute and something like this cancer. So it is just a part of the whole thing.
Yes.
It's just manifesting in different ways in different people based on their own experiences of now in their lives.
Yes, that really makes sense. So something might appear acute, but it's likely got chronic roots, and vice versa. It's all just manifestations of the same, I guess, underlying state.
Correct. Yeah, that's what he would say.
Okay, wonderful. So let's now explore what you've seen, and I think this links back to some of what we discussed in our last episode, but I think it's important for us to focus this specifically. What do you see is happening when we are introducing these psychedelic medicines into the system of someone who is suffering from cancer? What do you see is happening? Why would that be helpful?
Yeah, this is a great question. So in my experience, we worked together with one lady who's on stage 4. And what I noticed that the medicine it's super intelligent. This is the mushrooms that specifically we're talking about. I found that it started to work differently with this specific case, because, you know, in the psychedelic space, we always say that the medicines work and behave differently for each person, depending on what they need in this exact moment. So it's very different. So the medicine shows up and works different with a person who's at the end of their life, or they're diagnosed with stage 4, then somebody who is having chronic pains, back pain, or migraines, or autoimmune diseases, it works completely different. So it's almost like the medicine comes in with the urgency to address what is the most critical thing this person needs right this moment, and addresses that. So especially as the work progresses with the medicine, I find that not necessarily, because a lot of people that are in the psychedelic medicine space, they say, oh, if everybody will be taken through an emotional roller coaster of really digging into their suppressed emotions to dig out what is really the root cause of this cancer, but not necessarily. I think that's just our human mind trying to intellectualize some of this work. I feel like these substances work they're more sophisticated and far more intelligent, and they go into the system of the person and they address the most critical thing that needs to happen in that moment, and they go and work there. And sometimes they don't even take the person into their suppressed emotions or trauma work. Rather, they intervene in a very different way. So I found that super, like, this gives me chills, like this was super incredible. And then on the other hand, someone else who's really feeling stuck in their lives and suffering with a lot of minor health issues, and they really know there is something going on. Is it a childhood trauma? They cannot address it, they cannot find it. They've done lots of therapy, lots of, they tried lots of modalities, and they haven't really figured out what's going on, and they feel really stuck. Medicine works very differently with them. On a longer, less urgency, there's less urgency, there is more in-depth emotional work can arise, potentially.
That really makes sense. So in very, very simple terms, and it might be that actually trying to simplify it like this doesn't work, but I'm going to attempt it. Would you say that what's taking place is the medicine is working at a psychological level, and then the kind of, let's say, healthier psyche is unable to heal the body, in this instance, start to create conditions that maybe just aren't conducive to cancer? So do you see it like that? It's kind of, it's not working directly. I mean, it's hard to even split mind and body, but just for the purpose of trying to make some sense of this. So it's not working directly on the body, it's working at a brain level, a psychological level, which is then going on to change things in the body.
Actually, it's the other way around with the cancer patients, I've noticed. And here's why.
Okay.
Yeah, here's why. So in the medicine work that I've seen, it can work on 2 levels. It can work on a psychological level, actually, maybe even, let's go and say, the emotional as well. There are a lot of sayings nowadays. There's 3 parts to us, the psychological, the emotional body, and then, or the pain body, they say, or then the biological, the metabolic system. So I feel like if somebody, let's like you said, really to simplify it, if somebody's been diagnosed with stage 4, something like that, and they've never done any work before, they've never heard of trauma, they've never heard of childhood developmental trauma, or they've never heard of any of the new age concepts that we always indulge in, like suppressed emotions cause these chronic symptoms. Like, they've never even heard of any of, like, these traumatologists that we have nowadays, like with the advancement of the technological world, we can access so much now. We can listen to the professors' lectures, the psychologists, like we can have access to incredible psychologists that can tell us at least some kind of a clear pathway. We can understand our own psyche and so on. However, let's say a patient is diagnosed with stage 4 and they have nothing to do with any of this. Guess what? The medicine knows this. medicine knows that they don't have the capacity to go into the psychological, the emotional, the pain body right now. But they need to intervene. So they go straight into the metabolic system, the nervous system, they go into those cells, they go into the system and try and create and bring more balance to that system. So they prioritize the work.
Wow, I've got chills again. And is this based on your own experience of comparing the different experiences you're seeing as people work with these medicines? And is there anything that you've seen in terms of research that would support this as well? Not to say, by the way, it only counts if there's research. I'm just very fascinated in what you've just said.
Yes, I am observing what I'm seeing. So this is based on what I'm seeing. Also, I listen to a lot of the lectures from Stan Grove. I listen to a lot of these people who are in the clinical and from a mental health approach or palliative care. I listen to a lot of people who have done a lot of work in this field. Somehow, psychedelic medicines go directly to the biological systems or the physical body to repair, heal, restore, and bring balance. And it is not even just the cancer. This is not even about the cancer. This is about any illness that is, you know, it's severe and it's critical and it needs to be addressed, and it's time sensitive. So I feel like the medicine goes and does this work with the body on the physical level. But then as the patient progresses and they carry on with this work, and then the psychological part comes in. It is not the other way around. It is not on your first experience of psycho. It's not like that at all. Somebody can be, you know, working with the medicine and not even touch any of the psychological parts. They can immediately, you know, the reason I'm saying this is that I've observed another patient. She lives in another country, and she decided to microdose, and she has this autoimmune disease on her fingers and toes, and they bleed and she can't touch. They're hypersensitive, and there is no diagnosis for it. And she decides to explore microdosing, even at a microdosing level. And this person, it is not from our field of trauma healing, deep shadow work, inner work, you know, all of these concepts. She has no idea, and she probably doesn't care. She's just the elderly woman who's trying to be a happy grandma for the grandchildren, right? She explores microdosing. Within the few doses, she starts feeling tingly and sensations exactly where her issues are, toes and hands and fingers. And then she reported back saying, for the first time in decades, I was able to wash dishes without pain.
Oh, wow.
So she's not doing a psychological,
I love that story.
Right?
Yeah.
But she's not doing psychological work here. She's not doing emotional inner work here. What is going on here? The medicine is addressing directly what is needed for her to have that relief and be pain-free.
Wow. I'm just recalling also the stories you were telling me before we hit record, and the example where the woman was going into almost like a sleep state, and you said it wasn't sleep, you knew it wasn't sleep, and you know she was getting up regularly to go to the loo, but it sounded like from what you described that also didn't have this kind of like what we tend to think of psychedelics working in a very psychological, often visual way, and it sounds as though what you described there similarly, it was like something was happening working through her body, but not in a way that she was necessarily conscious of or needed to be conscious of.
Exactly. So this is a beautiful question. And this is, if we can acknowledge this about the psychedelic medicine work, I think half of our problems will just go away, because sometimes as humans, we try and intellectualize and come from a very logical perspective that we miss the point. And somehow in the mainstream space, psychedelics are being promoted as substances that directly work with the brain, and it's a mind-altering substances, and you get high and trippy, and it is not like that at all. We just need to remember that it works differently with everyone. And like I said, the body is the container. So we are the container, and the medicine interacts with this container. Since everybody has a very unique imprint and an individual template, then the medicine will work exactly how they need, what they need, and also what they are ready to receive. So that's the key word here. What when the individual is ready to receive, or what level they are ready to receive for whatever it is, the medicine will deliver. So we need to bring the focus to the container, to the individual, rather than putting all the pressure and burden the substances of calling them a magic pill or magic tool or magic medicine. Like, we cannot put all the burden, like we cannot burden these psychedelic medicines as panacea. We need to look at the body focus, keep bringing our focus onto the body, the container, and what this container is ready for. So that's the critical thing. And then it can work really that way with some people in the mind, and very hyperactive and very talkative and very chaotic, and like that. And then some people that, especially I found, if they are struggling with a very deep health issue, somehow the medicine takes them under this hypnotic state in order to take them offline, take their busy default frame of reference offline, take their default thinking offline, their survival offline, so that it can get to work and go and fix some of those, cells, sick parts, do some repairing, restoring. That's how I see it.
Wow. Yes. And have you seen what we've just been talking about there, almost like taking them offline in a way? Has that been something you've seen specifically with the work you've done with people who have cancer? Like, does that tend to be more the experience?
Yeah. So in my experience, I've seen that the more the person needs physical healing, the more hypnotic states they experience, the more almost sleepy, hypnotic, so that the when the mind is offline, the hyperactive mind, the default thought processes and all of that is offline, I feel like the body now can rest, go into a deep rest and restore state with the help of the medicine.
Amazing, really is. So I'm going to ask the question that I'm sure anyone listening who has a personal interest in this is going to want me to ask you, which is, what, if someone is experiencing cancer themselves, or perhaps a loved one is, what kind of benefits might they experience from working like this? Because you said, this isn't a panacea. I don't think you're sitting here saying, absolutely, here's a cure. But what are you saying? What have you seen? What's the hope for this medicine?
Yeah, wow, this is such a great question. Yeah. So again, one of my favorite people, Dr. Zach Bush, his name is, and
oh yes,
yeah, I never forget that conversation he had, one of his podcasts, because he works a lot with the cancer patients as well. And he said that when a patient comes into his clinic and looking for help, before he suggests anything, obviously he can use the traditional methods, and I'm sure, because he's mainly on the nutrition and changing your health diet and all of that, so that you change your whole entire system. So before any of that, he starts the conversation this way. He asks them, is this your exit strategy?
Wow.
Because if this is your exit strategy, then there's nothing we can do. All I can do is just to be there for you. So I find that is to be the most powerful reflection, inquiry, or question that needs to be asked in a situation like that. That's why I'm glad you said that this is not panacea, that it might not work, and it's true, it doesn't work for many people, right? And I actually applied this with this specific lady. When I had the video call, I actually said to her, is this your exit strategy? Because I understand that you may be tired, you may be exhausted, you may be, so much you've been carrying. Like, is this really your exit strategy? Because if it is, we need to really address it now. And if it isn't, you'd like to stay and be here and heal, let's get to work. So she paused for about a few moments. I'm guessing she was thinking of that question. I'm sure she probably wasn't expecting that. And she just looked at me and said, I want to stay.
Wow.
I
Wow.
want to
There is
stay.
something so beyond. There is something about that I think goes to a very deep level.
Yeah, it's beyond our grasp. And now I see that as, wow, she just made a contract with the universe.
Yes.
On a very deep spiritual level. She just said, look, yes, I have this, but I'm going to stay. I'd like to stay. And I feel like that's probably what accelerated her healing. Now she's in spontaneous remission. She has been for the 3-4 months. So yeah. So there's a lot at play. And so this would be my thing. And I love that. And I would always use this with patients that come from this, end of life, stressful, specific condition. I think this is a great start to have that reflection so that this can, kind of like defines, I don't know what's the right word. I'm just kind of, lost for words here, but do you know what I mean? Yeah, like this really kind of then changes everything along the journey in the healing process, I would say.
Yeah. So let's there is something I feel like I want to go there, but there's no words that quite touch where I want to go. So I'm just going to kind of, I feel like whatever that activates in listeners is going to do its own work. So going back to, I mean, in some ways, this is the, the miracle story. The woman you spoke about, I hope it's okay to talk about this in a bit more detail in the way that you were talking to me before we started recording. So if I remember rightly, a woman who had stage 4 cancer, and then just from the microdosing that she practiced, that was when she was shown to have gone into spontaneous remission. I mean, that on its own is one of those stories that gets your attention. It really is what everyone's looking for. And so there's part of me that really wants people to hear that and hear the possibility that provides. But there's also another part of me that I guess wants to give the space for you to perhaps give some more color and context to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. So I believe that something in her agreement to be here and heal and stay activated already her own innate healing intelligence, and kind of like decluttered or almost like dissolved the whatever was obscuring her in seeing the bigger picture. So those little things that really accelerated her process, I believe. This is my experience. And also she comes from a lineage of accepting alternative paths to well-being. So she comes from a lineage, a family of practice of like brewing a plant for headache or a bellyache from a childhood. They were like growing up in this cultural environment where medicine, plants, seeds, spices were a big part of their life. So she already had this affiliation and trust. So there was a huge trust in her. There's a deeply ingrained wiring in her that allowed her to trust the process, I believe. Because one of the things that obscures or blocks these healing processes with psychedelic medicines is person's conditioning, upbringing, and not really having been exposed to these alternative ways. Like the facilitator that I did my foundational work with from Peruvian native, she says, when I asked her, I remember when I asked her, what are you seeing in the Western people that are very different to how you live in the world that you're in? And she said, oh, they go to hospital for everything. They go to doctors for headache. They go and seek, medical service from everything. She goes, in where I grew up, you never go to hospital until there is a operation needs to be done or something very serious that you need to have. And we have plant for every single thing. So I'm guessing that kind of changes people's relationship with the medicine. So these psychedelic medicines, in my opinion, they are sentient and very intelligent. And when we have and develop that relationship with them, I think the healing or the whatever it is that we are, our intention in working with them amplifies and gets accelerated. So something to pay attention to.
There was something in that story when you were saying about how your mentor, you said it like this, I'm guessing you're paraphrasing, but something like there's a plan for everything. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, oh yeah, so it's kind of like, if it's a headache, it would be this plant. If it's a, stomachache of some kind, of this plant. And it took me back to the question I asked you right at the start. Like, I think I named it specifically psilocybin, but we could say psychedelics. Like, why are psychedelics a match for cancer? And it was just like, oh my goodness, it feels to me so of that same understanding, an understanding that we've lost. Like, that is the medicine for it that we've forgotten.
Absolutely. And in the native traditions, they call this curanderismo. Curanderismo, it's a word so what does that mean? It just means that living together, integrated with nature, and using all this abundant available plants and medicines that freely available to us, and having that symbiotic reciprocated relationship also. So we don't just take. So that's another thing that obscures the healing processes in the West, because we haven't been trained to reciprocate with nature, commune with nature, and integrate our lives into, because we are part of the nature, we desensitized everything and separated ourselves into little clean, perfect packages in our homes, so that understanding that we don't have kind of obscures the healing process. So again, another mentor of mine, she says, you were never meant to be sick. It's the lifestyle, it's the conditioning, it's the loss of connection that's making you sick. Because whatever the challenge in your physical health, supposed to be dissolved and released and healed organically when we live in connection and in symbiosis with relationship with the nature. And that really resonates deeply with me. And of course, having this lady coming from that understanding, she wasn't able to, she wasn't able to abstractly tell me this or word it, but I knew it. She had that deep connection with plants already. And when, you know, this come up and deciding to be here and living and healing, and then having the plant ally, she was like already had the upper hand in the healing process.
Oh, wow. I'm so glad that we've come to this part of the conversation. That feels so important. And I think it links to something I think it's very important for us to finish on as well. So that understanding, that deep connection with everything, but in this instance, we're talking very specifically, and I love the way you named it as like plant ally. That for me feels a really vital component in allowing the medicine to do its work, and so easily can be missed if we're approaching it again from this modern lens of, oh, I'll just take this and then I'll be cured, and not recognizing this is a relationship that you're entering into, which then links me to something that I know you'll agree is really important for us to get into. So we've been kind of moving between talking, as we've been talking about these medicines, we've been moving between talking about microdosing and also kind of more macrodosing ceremony, so taking much bigger doses. In doing so, and particularly when someone has, you know, a real desire to, if they're suffering from cancer, a real desire to work with medicine like this, there are some really important things that I know that you'll want to say in terms of selecting someone to work with. You know, most people aren't going to have the knowledge to be able to work with these medicines alone. They're going to need to choose someone to work with. What would you say is really important in selecting someone to do that work with?
What a great question. Thank you, Lian, again, once again. So can I squeeze in a couple of things before we go there?
Sure.
Just wanted to highlight a couple of things before we move to that, and that is, you said about the plant allies, and this also psychedelic substances, plants, ayahuasca, mescaline, mushrooms, also come from the nature, and also under the umbrella there are plant allies, right? And one of the conversations that we often have with some of my colleagues and other facilitators in the plant medicine space, some of them choose to facilitate 5-MeO DMT, which is a secretion from a frog in Soronan Desert. It's a very new psychedelic substance that's coming from a frog. I mean, who in the world would figure that out, right? It's crazy. But it is known as the God molecule, meaning that it's the most strongest substance, psychedelic substance known to a man. And it's quick, fast acting, and it's kind of like very intense, and then you're back within half an hour, right? That's the experience. And we always have these, you know, humorous conversations, like it kind of reveals a lot about the person who facilitates or who chooses, well, not so much chooses, but who kind of unfolds that way, that they become the facilitator of whatever the medicine they work with, right? And I always have this understanding that the more intense the medicine they choose to work with, it also reveals a lot of the intensity of the person themselves. And how far they have allowed themselves to go down into the depths of their own darkness. And the reason I want to tie this in with is what you said earlier, like for a headache, we can always take a mint tea. Mint is not psychoactive, but for a cancer, mushroom is psychoactive and it's very intense. So headache is not life-threatening, but cancer is. So we have all these rainbow of different plants for each thing can that alleviate us and heal us and give us the relief and help us. And that is also in that kind of, in the nature, that's how it is. Like I have this belief that the most important or the most intense plant allies or healing medicines are protected. For example, rose with the horns, and then nettle, like nettle tea. Like in order to get that nettle tea, you've got to go through the needles,
Yes.
right? So I feel like mushrooms, they are disguised with a toxicity, a compound, a chemical compound that they can kill you also, right? In the nature, you can't just go ahead and pick something and eat, right? So
wow, yes, it requires respect and
relationship,
understanding.
understanding, and like there's a lot of nuances behind all of this work. But in the West, like you said, it's like coming from that framework of I'll just take this and consume, because we have become such incredible consumers. We exhaust everything. And the indigenous people who worked with these psychedelic substances for millennia, they tell us, no, don't go there. Don't go there. We don't do that. They are just like us, and they have right to be in the world, in the planet Earth. And that our job, because we have hands and the feet, our job is to keep nurturing them, watering them, growing them, planting them, not just take. You can't do that. So it's a very similar understanding. And also, like, just to clarify the thing I wanted to say, the more urgent and critical and intense the healing process is required, our choice of plant is also intense, strong, psychoactive. That's just what I want to say.
Oh, I'm so glad you did. There was so much in what you've just shared. I love the fact that you gave that example of a headache with mint, because I did exactly that this morning. So yeah, that makes complete sense. There is I feel like we could actually record a whole episode in so much of what you've just shared, but I'm really glad that you just dropped that in. So
coming back to the harm reduction,
selecting like who would
exactly.
How do we know who is the right person to work with?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm seeing in the West, some of us that we live in this Western style of lifestyle, I think that we've lost our inner trust. So social media, mainstream media playing a massive role right now, pushing the psychedelic renaissance into the mainstream, because there's a lot of money to be made. A lot of corporate companies are coming with their millions to, buy lots of. Like there is one company that has been really criticized in the psychedelic community for even wanting to what's the word, where they trademark it, such as like soft pillows and soft lights and soft music in the session, silly things like that. So they get a lot of backlash and hate and criticism. So that's why the mainstream is going to continually push the psychedelic use. Therefore, many people who are vulnerable and desperate and uneducated are being driven into seeking psychedelic medicines, which is very, very dangerous right now. It's a very dangerous, also a very time of opportunity, but also really dangerous times in terms of we still have so much lack in education just because of the legal system. And just because of 5 decades of pushing them underground and really slowing the process of research and study. So therefore now people are kind of left to their own device, where they need to now make a decision to find a facilitator or find a medicine. Where do they find it? Where do they go? Which country they need to go? Where do they learn about it? So all these kind of complex questions are really arising every day. And unfortunately, people are being taken advantage in retreats. There is a term that my own facilitator person that I learned from Peru, she says, you guys think it's all love and light in Peru and all these indigenous countries, where they indigenous ways of practicing the medicine. She says, you think that it's all love and light and everyone's drinking ayahuasca and everyone's loving each other. No. She says, the medicine will work differently in the hands of an intention of the person. So people are, in fact, she talks about this term called shaman wars in Peru, where people are doing black magic, people are using these medicines that actually hurt each other.
Wow.
She said none of the Western people are aware of this because the mainstream media, everyone's going to like a retreat and wearing these robes and the crystals and feathers, and they take these pictures behind Andean mountains like in love and light. Everybody is kind of buying into that image. That is not what it is. So to clarify, this is the most and far complex and the piece that we need more education on. The medicines can be activated to actually do the opposite of healing and opposite of positive benefits in the hands and with a intention, a wrong not wrong intention. What would you say? Like the intention of harmful intention of facilitator can actually deliver just that. So therefore, now we have people that are really vulnerable, desperately looking for these medicines, also being re-traumatized or left to just, lost and not taken care of, no integration help, no harm reduction help, nothing. So that's really concerning and it's really worrying. So looking for a good facilitator who's also doing their own work equally, simultaneously, and they're really thriving to bring the best. When I say this, can I just also point out, because I don't want people to think that all people who come into medicine are randomly coming with this harmful intention. No, don't get me wrong. Even there are concepts that we talk in the psychedelic communities. Even people come from this narcissistic way of facilitating the medicine. They're not actually aware they are doing this. So it's not coming from that intentional, harmful way. They're just not aware. It's coming from a very unintentional, unaware space or place. So that's really important to know. And look for really credible places, retreats with good reviews. Maybe word of mouth is critical almost. I mean, it's hard to really nail every single harm reduction piece here, but it is very important that we do our research and make sure that we prioritize our safety, our psychological safety and our physical safety first and foremost when we choose to go into this kind of work.
Thank you so much. So we are out of time now, but I'm so grateful for everything we did manage to explore in this conversation. Yeah, and I feel like it's one that, maybe to come back in a year's time and share whatever you've seen since, because it does again feel like such an important conversation to be in at the moment. So for people that are listening and would like to know more about you, your work, and very specifically the work that you are continuing to do with cancer, where can they find out about that?
Thank you so much again, Lian, for this amazing conversation. You are absolutely right. It almost feels like a very hyper-progressive field that we're in right now, or the place that we're in right now. And I'm sure in a year's time, we might look back at this conversation and discover new things and maybe explore that and continually progress and continually, go further forward with this work, hopefully, and bring so much healing to the world, hopefully. Yeah, people can find me on psychedelicconversations.com. That's my website. I do microdosing integration sessions and programs, and also have the podcast also where I bring in lots of facilitators trying to figure out what this is and do our own best to educate everyone that feels called to. So,
thank you so much. And I want to name also that there can often be an understandable reluctance in people sharing, when something is nascent, when there isn't everything known. Often there can be a fear of like, what if I say the wrong thing, or if I suggest this and it turns out later not to be true. And I really appreciate you for being willing to kind of share from where you are, knowing there's going to be medicine in that without needing to know all the answers right now. I deeply appreciate that. Again, I think it's the right time for the conversation, even if we don't know everything about it right now. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Lian, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Appreciate you.
Thank you.